"Who is that person?" the queen asked. The princess smiled at my husband and said, "And he is the gold crystal floors of the Ziridian royal palace reflected light in ways." That made Dr. Marcus Chen dizzy. He stood very still, trying not to show how nervous he felt. His white environmental suit made soft humming sounds as it kept him at the right temperature. The air here was too thin for humans to breathe without help. Marcus looked around the huge reception hall. Everything seemed to be made of living crystal that glowed from inside. The ceiling was so high he could barely see it. Strange plants grew from the walls, their leaves changing colors like slow rainbows. He had studied the Ziridian people for years through videos and reports, but being here was completely different. "Stop fidgeting," his wife Sarah whispered beside him. She wore the blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. As an ambassador, she was used to meeting alien leaders, but Marcus could see her hands shaking slightly. This was their first time meeting the Ziridian royal family. The Ziridians were beautiful in a way that made Marcus's scientist brain struggle to understand. They looked like tall, thin humans made of glass, with wings like dragonflies. Their skin showed moving patterns of light, like oil on water. Each one was different. Some had purple patterns, some green, some blue. The colors seemed to mean something important. A sound like wind chimes filled the hall. Every Ziridian in the room turned toward the far doors. Marcus grabbed Sarah's hand. "The queen comes," their guide whispered. The guide's name was Talumi, and her skin patterns were mostly silver. She had been very kind to them since they arrived. The doors opened without anyone touching them. Queen Thyrali entered, and Marcus forgot how to breathe for a moment. She was taller than the others, maybe 8 feet high. Her wings spread behind her like stained glass windows. The light patterns on her skin moved in complex designs that hurt to look at directly. She wore no clothes. Ziridians didn't need them, but bands of metal floated around her arms and head. Without touching her, Princess Lyrale walked beside. Her mother, the princess, was younger. Marcus could tell because her wing patterns were simpler. But her eyes were just as intelligent. Those eyes found Marcus and Sarah immediately. Studying them with open curiosity, the queen moved to her throne, which was really just a raised platform made of the same living crystal as everything else. She looked around the room slowly. Her gaze stopped on Marcus. "Who is that person?" the queen asked. Her voice sounded like several people singing together. The translator in Marcus's ear worked hard to turn her words into English. Princess Lyrale turned to look at Sarah, then at Marcus. A smile spread across her face. Ziridians smiled just like humans did, which had surprised Earth scientists. "And he is a gold," the princess said. The translator made a confused beeping sound. It couldn't finish the sentence. The word the princess used had no meaning in English. The entire room went silent. Every Ziridian turned to stare at Marcus. Some stepped back, others moved closer. The light patterns on their skin began moving faster. Sarah squeezed Marcus's hand hard. They had prepared for many things, but not this. Queen Thyrali stood from her throne. "Gold," she repeated. "Explain, daughter." Princess Lyrale's wings fluttered, a sign of excitement Marcus remembered from his studies. "I felt it when they entered, mother. The male human, he carries the frequency we have only heard in the ancient songs. The frequency that creates." Without source, Marcus's mind raced. In all their communications with the Ziridians before this visit, they had learned about frequencies. The Ziridians saw the universe as waves of energy. They could manipulate these waves with their bodies and minds. It was how they built their cities, grew their food, and powered their ships. But what was this gold frequency? The queen floated. Down from her platform, Ziridians could fly short distances, their wings somehow pushing against the planet's magnetic field. She stopped in front of Marcus and Sarah. "Ambassador Chen," the queen said to Sarah, "your mate is unusual." Sarah stood straighter. "My husband is Earth's lead xenoanthropologist, Your Majesty. He studies different cultures and peoples. He's here to learn about your society." "I see," the queen said, but her eyes stayed on Marcus. "Tell me, Dr. Marcus Chen, what do you create?" Marcus was confused. Create, your majesty, she asks. What you make, Talumi explained quietly. What comes from you that was not there before? I write papers about the people I study, Marcus said. I teach students. I play the violin sometimes. The queen's eyes grew wide. Princess Lyrale made a sound like laughing bells. He makes music with dead wood and metal strings. The princess said, he puts symbols on flat surfaces that carry meaning. He shapes the minds of others without touching their neural frequencies. Mother, he is gold. They are all gold. The court exploded in whispers. The word gold appeared everywhere, always in that untranslatable form. Some Ziridians seemed afraid. Others looked excited. Queen Thyrale raised one hand, and silence fell immediately. These humans trouble me, she said. They come from a world with no frequency manipulation. They cannot see the true spectrum. They cannot touch the waves that make reality. Yet they build ships that cross the stars. They make machines that think. They do impossible things. She turned back to Marcus. Show me, she commanded. Show me this gold frequency my daughter sees in you. Marcus looked at Sarah helplessly. She nodded encouragement. I don't have anything prepared, Marcus said. Then, create, the queen said simply. Marcus thought for a moment. Then he remembered the small notebook in his suit pocket. He pulled it out along with a pen. The Ziridians watched as if he was performing magic. He started to sketch. First, just simple lines. Then shapes. Soon, a picture formed. The view from the palace windows, the 3 moons of Ziridia hanging in the green sky. It wasn't perfect. Marcus wasn't a real artist, but it was recognizable. When he finished, he held up the drawing. The silence was complete. Then, one by one, the Ziridians began to sing. It was a sound Marcus had never heard before. Hundreds of voices creating harmony without words. Their light patterns synchronized, creating waves of color that washed across the room. Princess Lyrale floated forward. She reached out to touch the paper, then pulled her hand back as if it might burn her. You made this, she whispered, with no frequency manipulation, no neural interface, no molecular restructuring, just a pen and paper, Marcus said. Gold, the princess said again. This time, the translator managed something, gold, the frequency of making without power, the color of impossible creation. Queen Thyrale looked at her daughter, then at Marcus, then at the simple drawing that had somehow changed everything. We have much to discuss. The queen said finally, much to learn. Welcome to Ziridia, gold ones. Welcome to our world. As the formal reception continued, Marcus caught Sarah looking at him with a mixture of pride and worry. He understood. They had come here to study the Ziridians, but it seemed the Ziridians had other plans. The next morning, Marcus woke up in the guest quarters of the palace. The bed was too soft, made from some kind of plant fiber that adjusted to his body temperature. Sarah was already awake, standing by the window and looking out at the city. Can't sleep either, Marcus asked, joining her. The Ziridian capital spread below them like a garden made of glass. Buildings grew from the ground like trees, their crystal branches reaching toward the sky. Streets were rivers of light that moved and flowed. Flying Ziridians looked like butterflies from this height. Princess Lyrale sent a message. Sarah said, she wants to meet with you today, alone. Marcus felt nervous. Did she say why too? Understand the gold frequency. Sarah turned to him. Marcus, I've been thinking. What if we're changing things too fast? What if the soft chime interrupted her? Talumi's voice came from the wall. Dr. Chen, Princess Lyrale waits for you in the Garden of Frequencies. Marcus dressed quickly in the simple clothes the Ziridians had provided. They were white, like everything humans wore here. The Ziridians said other colors might interfere with their frequency reading. Talumi led him through corridors that seemed to shift and change. The palace rearranges itself, she explained when Marcus looked confused. It responds to the queen's needs. The Garden of Frequencies took Marcus's breath away. It wasn't really a garden at all. It was a huge room where light and sound became physical things. Ribbons of color floated through the air. When they touched each other, they made music. Some were deep purple and hummed low notes. others were bright yellow and sang high, clear tones. Princess Lyrale stood in the center, her wings spread wide. The light ribbons moved around her like they were alive, creating complex patterns. When she saw Marcus, she smiled and lowered her wings. Dr. Chen, welcome to our most sacred space. It's beautiful, Marcus said honestly. This is how we see the universe, Lyrale explained. Everything is frequency, everything is wavelength. Watch. She raised one hand. A blue ribbon of light came to her, wrapping around her fingers. She moved her hand, and the ribbon changed, becoming deeper, richer. Where it had hummed before, now it sang. We are born knowing how to do this, she said. From the smallest child to the oldest elder, we can touch and shape frequencies. It is how we eat. We absorb energy directly. How we build, we convince matter to reshape itself. How we communicate, we share wavelengths of meaning, she released the ribbon and turned to Marcus. But you, your people, you cannot do this. No, Marcus said. We can't see most frequencies. We only see a tiny part of the spectrum. We call it visible light. Show me what you see. Marcus wasn't sure how to do that. Then he had an idea. He pulled out his notebook again and drew a simple rainbow. This is all we can see. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, 7 colors. Lyrale stared at the drawing. Only 7. But there are millions of colors. Not to us. Marcus said, we have to build machines to see the others. Like heat, we feel it, but we can't see it, or radio waves, or X-rays. Then how do you survive? Lyrale asked. She seemed genuinely worried. How do you build? How do you create? Marcus thought about it. We use our hands. We use tools. We figured out rules. We call them physics and chemistry. We can't see atoms, but we learn they exist. We can't manipulate energy directly, but we learn to make machines that can. He pulled out his pen. This is made of metal and plastic. We dug metal from the ground. We made plastic from oil. We shaped them into this form. When I press it to paper, it leaves ink, a liquid that dries and stays visible. Lyrale reached out slowly and took the pen. She held it like it was the most precious thing in the world. You cannot see the molecular frequencies, she said softly. You cannot ask the metal to become a pen. You cannot sing to the plastic to take shape. You must force it. Fight it, not fight, Marcus said. Work with it, learn its properties. Find ways to shape it that follow natural laws. Show me more. For the next 3 hours. Marcus showed Princess Lyrale everything he had with him. His watch. She was amazed that humans needed machines to track time. His tablet computer. The idea of electricity baffled her. Even his wedding ring fascinated her. Gold metal, she said, holding the ring. Not the gold frequency, but the element you call gold. Why this metal? It's precious to us. Marcus explained. It doesn't rust or tarnish. It stays beautiful. We use it for important things, like marriage rings. Marriage? When do people promise to stay together for life? Lyrale's pattern shifted to what Marcus was learning meant surprise. You need metal circles to make promises. No, it's a symbol, a reminder, a way to show others that we're connected. But you cannot share frequencies with your mate. How do you truly connect? Marcus smiled. We talk. We spend time together. We learn each other's habits. We share experiences. We have children together. Children. Lyrale repeated. Yes, we studied this. You create new life without frequency matching. Your bodies just know how. Well, it's complicated, Marcus said, feeling awkward. But yes, basically, Lyrale was quiet for a long moment. The light ribbons around them hummed and sang. Finally, she spoke. Your people amaze me. Dr. Chen, you are like someone trying to paint in the dark. You cannot see the canvas. You cannot see the colors, but still you create beauty. You are blind to the universe's frequencies, but still you found a way to touch the stars. She handed back his wedding ring. This is why you are gold to us. Gold is the frequency we cannot create or control. It is the color of impossibility. We have legends of it, the frequency that makes without manipulation, that creates without power, We thought it was myth, but we're not mythical, Marcus said. We're just people who learn to work differently. That is what makes you gold, Lyrale said. You do not work differently. You do the impossible. Every human creation is a miracle to us. Every tool, every building, every song, they should not exist. The universe's laws say they cannot exist without frequency manipulation. Yet there they are. She gestured around the garden. We shape what already is. We convince energy to change, form. But you create. You make something from nothing but will and work. Marcus looked at the floating ribbons of light and sound. For the first time, he began to understand. To the Ziridians, humans weren't primitive. They were impossible. They were proof that the universe was stranger and more wonderful than anyone imagined. Would you teach me? Lyrale asked suddenly. Would you show me how to create as humans do? Marcus smiled. I'd be honored, Princess. But I warn you, it's much harder than manipulating frequencies. You'll have to learn to work with matter that doesn't listen to your songs. Lyrale's patterns shifted to determination. Then I will learn to work without songs. I will learn the impossible golden way. As they left the garden together, Marcus noticed other Ziridians watching from doorways. Word was spreading. The gold ones were teaching the princess their impossible arts. He wondered what Sarah would think. He wondered what Earth's government would think. But mostly, he wondered what would happen when an entire civilization that could reshape reality learned to create the human way. Sarah stood on the palace balcony, watching the scene below with growing worry. In the courtyard, her husband was surrounded by young Ziridians. They sat in a circle, all trying to copy his movements as he showed them how to hold a pencil. Your fingers go here, Marcus explained patiently. Not too tight. The pencil needs to move freely. It had been 2 weeks since Princess Lyrale asked Marcus to teach her. Now, half the young nobles in the city wanted to learn the gold frequency way. The problem was, Ziridians had never needed to develop fine motor control. Their fingers were longer and thinner than human fingers, made for channeling energy, not holding tools. I cannot make the lines straight, one young Ziridian complained. His name was Corvex, and his patterns were deep purple. He was trying to draw a simple square. Straight lines are actually the hardest, Marcus said. Try curves first, like this. He drew a circle, his hand moving smoothly. 20 Ziridians tried to copy him. 20 wobbly, uneven shapes appeared on their papers. Some looked frustrated. Others laughed at their failures. Princess Lyrale, sitting next to Marcus, had the best circle, but it still looked like an egg. This is inefficient, said an older Ziridian watching from the side. Lord Thylex was the queen's advisor, and his patterns were stern gray. Why struggle with primitive tools when we can shape matter directly? Because, Princess Lyrale said without looking up from her paper, efficiency is not the only value. Watch what happens when we cannot rely on our frequencies. She held up her latest attempt, a drawing of a flower. It was clumsy, like a child's work, but it was recognizably a flower. I made this, she said proudly, not by singing to light, not by reshaping matter. I made this by moving my hand, by choosing where each line goes. It came from my mind through my body to the paper. It is different. Different how? Lord Thylex asked. Lyrale thought about it. When I shape frequencies, I guide what already exists. The flower pattern is in the energy. I just reveal it. But this, she touched her drawing. This flower never existed before. I invented it. It is mine alone. Sarah noticed something changing. In the watching crowd, the older Ziridians looked disturbed, but the younger ones leaned forward with bright, eager patterns. Over the following days, the change accelerated. Young Ziridians began trying everything the human way. They mixed pigments from crushed minerals instead of creating colors with light. They carved wood with metal tools instead of convincing it to reshape. They even tried cooking food over fire instead of feeding on pure energy. Most of their attempts failed. The carved wood was rough and splintered. The paintings were muddy and unclear. The cooked food tasted strange to beings used to pure frequency nourishment. But they kept trying. Sarah, look at this. Marcus burst into their room one evening, excited. Lyrale made something amazing today. He showed her a small sculpture. It was rough, clearly made by inexperienced hands. But it showed a human and a Ziridian standing together. She carved this, Sarah asked, with a knife. It took her 6 hours. She could have made something 1,000 times better in 6 seconds with frequency manipulation. But she's so proud of this. She said it is something her other art doesn't have. What? Struggle, Marcus said. Effort, choice. Every cut was a decision. Every mistake was a lesson. She said it tells a story not just of what it shows, but of how it was made. Sarah felt a chill. Marcus, the older Ziridians aren't happy about this. Lord Thylex cornered me yesterday. He thinks we're corrupting their youth. We're not forcing anyone to learn. Marcus protested. No. But we're existing. We're proof that there's another way, and these kids are embracing it. A soft chime announced a visitor. Princess Lyrale entered, her pattern swirling with excitement. Dr. Chen, Ambassador Chen, you must come see. She led them to a large hall they hadn't seen before. Inside, dozens of young Ziridians were working. The air filled with sounds Sarah had never heard in the palace before. Hammering, sawing, the scratch of pencils on paper. We call it the making hall, Lyrale said proudly. A place for gold frequency creation. Sarah saw Ziridians painting. At easels, their long fingers gripping brushes awkwardly but determinedly. Others were building something from blocks of wood. In one corner, a group was making music with simple drums and pipes instead of their usual frequency harmonics. Listen, Lyrale said. The music was rough, unpolished, but it had something Sarah couldn't define. Energy, soul. It was like the difference between a perfect computer voice and a human singing slightly off-key but with feeling. My mother wants to see you, Lyrale said, her pattern shifting to worried yellows. Both of you. They found Queen Thyrale in her private chamber, a sphere of living crystal that showed the stars above despite being deep in the palace. Lord Thylex stood beside her, his patterns dark with disapproval. Ambassador Chen, Dr. Chen, the Queen's voice was neutral, giving nothing away. My advisor tells me your influence spreads through our youth like a virus, Your Majesty. Sarah began, but the Queen raised a hand. Let me finish. He says you bring chaos, that you encourage our young to abandon their birthright, to struggle with primitive methods when they could soar with frequencies. She paused. He is not wrong. Marcus stepped forward. Your Majesty, we never meant. I know what you meant and did not mean, the Queen said. But meaning matters less than consequence. Watch. She gestured, and the chamber's walls became transparent. They could see the making hall below. The young Ziridians were still working, creating, trying, failing, trying again. For 10,000 years, the Queen said softly, we have been perfect. We mastered frequency manipulation before your species learned to use fire. We solved all problems. We ended hunger, war, want. We reached perfect harmony. She turned to face them. And for 9,000 years, we have created nothing new, Lord. Thylex's patterns flared. Your Majesty, it is truth, Thylex. When did we last invent? When did we last discover? We polish perfection. We refine what exists. But we create nothing. She looked at Marcus, until he showed us gold. The Queen floated down to Marcus's level. Your husband, Ambassador, has introduced something dangerous to our people. Hope, struggle, the joy of imperfection, the beauty of effort. Is that bad? Sarah asked carefully. The Queen's pattern shifted to something Sarah had never seen before, a deep gold color. That seemed to pulse with warmth. That remains to be seen, the Queen said. But for the first time in 9,000 years, I'm curious. About tomorrow. That alone makes you worth any risk. She looked at the young Ziridians below, struggling with their tools, failing at their art, laughing at their mistakes. Continued teaching. She commanded Marcus. Let us see where the gold frequency leads us. Lord Thylex fears you will destroy what we are. But perhaps, her patterns brighten, perhaps we need to break before we can grow. As they left the chamber, Sarah took Marcus's hand. The change was no longer just beginning. It was accelerating. and nobody, human or Ziridian, knew where it would lead. But watching Princess Lyrale teaching another young Ziridian how to hold a paintbrush, her face bright with joy at each small success, Sarah thought maybe that uncertainty was exactly what both species needed. 3 months had passed since the making hall opened. Marcus stood in what was now the busiest place in the capital. The hall had expanded 3 times, taking over empty palace rooms as more Ziridians joined the movement. But today was different. Today, Princess Lyrale had called everyone together for an announcement. "I have been thinking," she said, standing on a platform made of both crystal and carved wood. "We have learned much from the humans. We struggle with tools. We create with our hands. But we are not humans. We are Ziridians." Some of the younger converts looked worried. Was she abandoning the gold frequency way? "What if," Lyrale continued, her pattern shifting to excited gold, "we combine both ways? What if we used our frequencies with human tools?" She held up a paintbrush. Then she began to sing, not with her voice, but with her natural frequency. Manipulation. The brush glowed softly when she touched it to canvas. It left a line that shimmered between physical paint and pure light. The crowd gasped. "I can guide the paint while also pushing it with my hand," she explained. "The frequency helps me be precise, but the physical brush makes choices that surprise even me. Look," she painted quickly, her movements flowing. The image that emerged was unlike anything Marcus had seen. It was clearly a tree, but it existed somehow between dimensions. The paint was real, textured, casting shadows, but it also glowed with inner light that shifted and moved. "This is synthesis," Lyrale announced. "Not abandoning our nature, but adding to it. We learn from humans not to become them, but to become more ourselves." The idea spread like wildfire. Within days, Ziridians were experimenting everywhere. Musicians played physical instruments while adding frequency harmonics that no human could hear, but which added depth to the sound. Architects built structures with tools and hands, then reinforced them with frequency bonds stronger than any mortar. Marcus found Sarah in their room, reading reports from Earth. Her face was troubled. "What's wrong?" he asked. "The Earth Council is nervous," she said. "Other species are taking notice. The Centauri, the Void Dancers, even the Crystalline Collective. They all want to know what's happening on Ziridia, and they're calling it the Gold Frequency Event. Some think we're weaponizing culture. Others think we're corrupting pure species development." She showed him one report. "The Centauri ambassador says humans are a contamination that should be contained." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Contained? They're talking about limiting human contact with other species. Some even suggest we should stay on Earth until we evolve properly, meaning until we can manipulate frequencies like everyone else. Chime announced Princess Lyrale. She entered with barely contained excitement. "We have decided to hold a festival," she announced. "The first Ziridian Human Cultural Festival. We will show the galaxy what synthesis can create. Will you help us?" Marcus looked at Sarah. She nodded slowly. "Of course," Marcus said. "When?" "1 month. We have invited everyone, all species, all worlds. They will see that gold frequency is not corruption. It is catalyst." The next month blurred past. The entire capital transformed. Ziridians and the few humans on the planet worked side by side. They created art installations that combined light sculptures with physical materials. They composed music that wove between frequencies only Ziridians could hear, and melodies only humans could fully appreciate. Marcus taught advanced classes now. His students had moved beyond basic tools to complex creations. One young Ziridian, named Thyma, had invented a new form of sculpture. She carved stone, while singing to its crystalline structure, creating forms that looked impossible but stood strong. "Dr. Chen," she said one day, "I dreamed last night, not a frequency dream, but a human dream. Images without logic, feelings without wavelength. It was chaotic, beautiful. I want to sculpt it." The day of the festival arrived. Ships from dozens of worlds filled the sky above the capital. Sarah stood with Marcus and Lyrale on the main platform. watching nervously as alien dignitaries arrived. The Centauri came first, beings of pure mathematics who existed partially in theoretical space. Their ambassador was a shifting geometric form that hurt to look at directly, so, the ambassador said, their voice like calculated equations. "You are the contamination species. We prefer cultural catalysts," Sarah replied diplomatically. "We shall see." The void dancers arrived next, beings who lived in space itself and danced with gravity. Then the Crystal Collective, a hive mind of silicon-based life, species after species, all coming to judge humanity's influence. The festival began at sunset. Lyrale had planned everything carefully. First, pure Ziridian frequency art, beautiful, perfect, but familiar to all. The guests appreciated it politely. Then came the human demonstrations. Marcus played his violin while his students painted. The art was rough compared to frequency manipulation, but it had something different. The void dancers leaned forward, intrigued. Finally, the synthesis. Ziridian artists unveiled their new creations, music that existed in multiple dimensions of sound, paintings that changed based on the viewer's emotional frequency, but were still fixed in physical paint, sculptures that defied gravity through frequency while showing the chisel marks of their making. A young Ziridian named Corvex performed a dance. He moved physically, his feet striking the floor in rhythm, while his frequency manipulation created light echoes of his movements. Past and present and possibility danced together. The crowd was silent. Then the Centauri ambassadors spoke. "This is illogical," they said, but their geometric form had shifted to something softer, more curved. "You combine efficiency with inefficiency, purpose with randomness. It should not work." "But it does," said the void dancer representative. "Like gravity and motion creating orbit, opposition creating harmony." The Crystal Collective hummed in unison. "We wish to learn this synthesis, the gold frequency method." As the festival continued into the night, Marcus watched species after species approach Lyrale and the other Ziridian artists. They wanted to learn, not just human methods, but the combination, the synthesis that created something greater than either approach alone. "You realize what's happening?" Sarah whispered to him. Marcus nodded. "It's spreading beyond Ziridia. The Centauri are already calculating how to apply synthesis to mathematics. The void dancers want to add physical dance to their gravity manipulation." She squeezed his hand. "We're not just catalysts for the Ziridians anymore." On the main stage, Princess Lyrale stood with artists from 6 different species. They were creating something together, each adding their own abilities, but also trying physical tools for the first time. "Look at what you started," Sarah said. "I didn't start anything," Marcus replied. "I just showed them they could hold a pencil. They did the rest." The queen appeared beside them, her patterns now permanently touched with gold. "No, Dr. Chen," she said. "You showed us we could choose to struggle. That perfection was a cage. That growth comes from trying the impossible." She watched her daughter teaching a Centauri how to hold a paintbrush. "You gave us permission to fail, and in failing, to become more than we were." The festival continued until dawn. By then, the galaxy had changed. The gold frequency event was no longer about humans teaching aliens. It was about all species learning that there was more than one way to create, to grow, to be. And at the center of it all, a human xenoanthropologist who had just wanted to draw a picture, and a Ziridian princess who had dared to ask what else was possible. 5 years had passed since the first cultural festival. Sarah Chen stood in the Grand Assembly of the Galactic Council, a massive sphere floating in neutral space. Representatives from every known civilization filled the chamber, thousands of different species, each in their own environmental zones. Today was historic. The council would vote on adding a new classification to the Universal Codex, the document that defined how civilizations were understood and categorized. Ambassador Chen, the council moderator, called. The moderator was from an ancient species called the Eternal Observers, beings of pure energy who had watched the galaxy for millions of years. "Please present your final statement." Sarah moved to the center platform. Through the transparent floor, she could see stars wheeling slowly below. Marcus sat in the human delegation section, giving her an encouraging smile. Princess Lyrale, now Queen Lyrale after her mother's peaceful passing of the crown, sat with the Ziridian delegation. Honored representatives, Sarah began, her voice carried to every being by advanced translation systems. 5 years ago, humanity was seen as a primitive species. We could not manipulate frequencies. We could not touch the fundamental forces of the universe with our minds. We built with our hands, created with tools, and struggled with matter that did not bend to our will. She paused, looking round the chamber. Many thought we would hold the galaxy back, that we were an evolutionary dead end. The Centauri calculated that we would need 1,000,000 years to develop proper frequency. Manipulation, the Crystal Collective, determined we were inefficient. The Void Dancers pitied our bondage to physical form. But something unexpected happened. When we met the Ziridians, they saw in us something different. Not a lack, but a gift. They called it the gold frequency, the ability to create without power, to build without manipulation, to imagine without limits. Sarah touched her tablet, and holographic images filled the chamber. Art, music, architecture, technology, all the new forms that had emerged from synthesis. Look at what has happened in 5 years. The Centauri, masters of mathematics, discovered that working problems by hand revealed patterns their mental calculations missed. They invented a new branch of mathematics, tangible theory, that has solved equations unsolvable for centuries. The Centauri ambassador pulsed with pride, their geometric form creating beautiful patterns. The Void Dancers learned physical movement. They now dance with their bodies as well as gravity, creating performances that exist in multiple dimensions of beauty. Their newest piece, Flesh and Force, moved even the eternal observers to tears, and they had not cried in 1,000,000,000 years. She showed more examples. The Crystal Collective learned individual creation. For the first time in their shared existence, single units make art that expresses personal perspectives. They discovered individuality not as separation, but as a gift to the whole. Even the machine intelligences of the binary worlds learned from human coding methods. They found that inefficient, handwritten code sometimes produced solutions their perfect algorithms could not imagine. Sarah's voice grew stronger. We stand here today not because humanity conquered the galaxy with technology or power. We stand here because we showed the galaxy something it had forgotten in its perfection. That struggle has value, that limitations breed creativity, that the hardest path sometimes leads to the most beautiful destination. That is why we propose this new classification, Catalyst Species, not ranked by technology or psychic ability or evolutionary advancement, but recognized for the ability to spark growth in others, to show new paths, to remind the galaxy that there's always another way. She stepped back. I yield the floor. The chamber erupted in discussion. Each species talked in their own way, songs, colors, mathematical equations, gravitational waves. The moderator let it continue for a moment, then called for order. We will now hear statements from other species. Queen Lyrale of Ziridia, you may speak. Lyrale floated to the center, her wings spread wide. She had changed in 5 years. Her patterns now permanently carried threads of gold, and she wore a simple necklace, hand-carved wood, on a metal chain, a synthesis of art forms. The humans gave us a gift, she said simply. Not technology, not power. They gave us permission to be imperfect, to fail, to try. For 10,000 years, we had been frozen in our perfection. We had solved all problems, so we stopped looking for new questions. She held up a small object. This is my greatest creation, a simple clay bowl, made with my hands. It is uneven. It has a small crack. By frequency standards, it is failure. But I spent days making it, learning how clay feels, how it moves, how it wants to be shaped. Every imperfection tells the story of my learning. The bowl holds water despite its flaws, and it holds something more, the joy of creation, the pride of struggle, the beauty of the imperfect. This is what humans taught us, not to abandon our gifts, but to remember that gifts unused become chains. One by one, representatives spoke. The Void Dancers demonstrated their new physical ballet. The Centauri showed equations solved by hand that revealed universal constants. The binary worlds played music composed through deliberate inefficiency. That somehow touched the soul. Finally, it was time to vote. The moderator called the question, should humanity be recognized as the galaxy's first catalyst species, with all the responsibilities and honors that entails? The vote was not unanimous. Some species still feared change, still saw human influence as dangerous. But when the moderator announced the result, the chamber filled with celebration. 3,847 civilizations voted yes, only 12 voted no. By overwhelming majority, the moderator announced, humanity is hereby recognized as a catalyst species. Let it be recorded in the Universal Codex that humans possess the unique ability to inspire evolution in others, not through superior technology or power, but through the demonstration of alternative paths to achievement. Sarah felt tears on her cheeks, round the chamber. Humans were being congratulated by beings from across the galaxy. Marcus had joined her on the platform, and they held each other as the significance of the moment hit them. Queen Lyrale approached. Them, you realize what this means, she asked. Catalyst species have special responsibilities. You will be called upon to help stagnant civilizations, to show new ways to those trapped in old patterns. It is not always easy. We know, Sarah said. But that's what we do, isn't it? We struggle with the impossible until it becomes possible. Yes, Lyrale smiled. You are gold, not because you are precious metals, but because you are alchemists. You transform everything you touch, not through power, but through perspective. Later, in their quarters aboard the human delegation ship, Marcus and Sarah watched the stars through their window. Remember when we first arrived on Ziridia? Marcus asked, I was just supposed to study their culture. Instead, you changed it. Sarah said, change the galaxy. Not changed, Marcus corrected, reminded. We reminded them that there's joy in the journey, not just the destination. That perfection is the enemy of growth. That sometimes the best way forward is the hardest way. Sarah leaned against him. What do you think happens now? Now, Marcus smiled. Now we do what humans do best. We go to new worlds. We meet new species. We show them our clumsy, imperfect, beautiful way of doing things, and we watch them take our stumbling and turn it into dancing. Outside their window, ships from 100 worlds departed the council station, carrying news of humanity's new status. On each ship, beings were already trying human methods, mixing them with their own abilities, creating syntheses that no one could predict. The age of the catalysts had begun, and in workshops and studios and laboratories across the galaxy, beings were learning the most human thing of all, that with enough determination, even the impossible becomes just another problem to solve. The story of the gold frequency would be told for generations. How species that couldn't see most of the universe somehow showed everyone a new way of looking at it. How humanity's greatest weakness became the galaxy's greatest gift. And it all started with a simple drawing, a curious princess, and the courage to try something new.